Starting a business is not just about you having a great idea or raising capital. It's also about protecting yourself legally. Think about it. Most startups don't fail because of lack of ideas. They fail because of conflicts, ownership issues, or legal troubles. In today's video, I'll be breaking down the essential contracts every startup needs, what they mean, and why they matter. Trust me, missing one of them can cost you your entire business. The first contract is the Founders Agreement. This is a contract between you and your co-founders. It's basically a marriage contract for your business. Here are the details of what a founder's contract must contain. The first thing it should contain is the equity split. The equity split simply says who owns what percentage of the company. Is it 50-50, 70-30, or is there any other arrangement? The second thing every founder's agreement must contain are the roles and responsibilities. Who is the CEO? Who is handling the product? Who is handling marketing? This avoids overlap and confusion. The next thing every founder's agreement must contain is the decision-making process. How are big decisions made? Is it by votes? Is it by majority, or is it by a board approval? The next thing it must contain is the exit strategy. What happens if a founder wants to quit, sell his shares, or gets fired? The next thing the founder's agreement must contain is the vesting schedule. A vesting schedule prevents a founder from leaving early and still holding equity in the company. The lockup period is typically about 4 years. Without a founder's contract, you risk founders fighting over control, equity disputes, or even legal battles. The next agreement we'll be covering is the non-disclosure agreement, popularly known as the NDA. When you hear NDA, think of Idea Protection Shield. Here are the things every non-disclosure agreement must contain. It must have a definition of confidential information. What exactly counts as a secret? Is it code? Is it financials? Is it client data? What are the obligations of the receiving party? Is it that whoever signs the non-disclosure agreement must not share that information or use the said information for personal gain? What is the duration of the non-disclosure agreement? This simply means how long does the confidentiality last. Typically, non-disclosure agreement lasts for 2 to 5 years. The next major clause that must be included in a non-disclosure agreement is the exclusion clause. What information is not protected? For example, information that is already within the public domain is not protected in a non-disclosure agreement. Non-disclosure agreements are especially important when pitching to investors, hiring freelancers, or bringing in contractors. You don't want that brilliant idea of yours to show up somewhere else. The next major agreement we'll be covering is the employment or contractor agreement. This is where most startups make a big mistake. They hire talent without written contracts. Here's why this is dangerous. Imagine you hire a developer to build your app. You pay them, but you don't have a contract with them. Later, they show up and claim they still own your code. Every employment or contractor agreement must contain the following. The first is the scope of work. What exactly is the employee or freelancer responsible for? The second is the payment terms. What is the salary? Is it an hourly rate? Are they to be paid via a milestone achieved? It should also contain a confidentiality clause. This prevents leaking of sensitive data. It should also contain an intellectual property ownership clause. Work created belongs to the company and not the individual. The last major thing an employment or a contractual agreement must contain is the termination clause. This defines how each party can exit the relationship. With this contract, you ensure the business owns its assets, code, designs, marketing content, everything. The next major contract we'll be covering is the Shareholders Agreement. Now, if you're going to bring in investors into your business, you definitely need a Shareholders Agreement. This is like a rulebook for your company's ownership and investor relationship. Every shareholder agreement must include the following: share distribution. This defines who owns how many shares in the company. The next is the voting rights. Which decision requires investor approval? For example, it could be that the company cannot be sold without the shareholders' approval. The next thing it should contain is the dividend policy. This defines how profits are shared. Another thing a shareholders agreement must have is how shares are transferred. This defines what happens when a shareholder wants to sell their shares. For example, are others given the right of first refusal? The next major clause is what is the dispute resolution method? Are parties going to resort to arbitration or mediation when conflict arises? Without this, investors may pull out, or worse, drag you into a legal battle. The final agreement we'll be talking about is the terms and conditions and privacy policy. This is for startups building websites, apps, or platforms. For terms and conditions, it must include the following. It must set the rules for how customers use your product or service. It limits your liability if something goes wrong. It protects you from abusive users. As for privacy policy, it is required by law in most countries, including Nigeria. It tells users how you collect, use, and store their data. It builds trust with your clients. Without this, you risk lawsuits, regulatory fines, and you risk losing user trust. Depending on your startup, you may also need intellectual property assignment agreements. This is needed if employees invent something under your company. You may also need service level agreements. This is needed if you provide B2B services. Finally, you may also need a partnership agreement. This is required if you are teaming up with another company. So there you have it, the contracts every startup needs to avoid disaster. Remember, ideas build startups, but contracts protect them. If you found this content valuable, kindly hit the subscribe button. Stay legally safe. I'll see you in the next video.